Welcome back to another deep dive. So when you think about resilience or power, what usually comes to mind?
Right, it's usually something solid.
Exactly. I mean, we almost always picture it in terms of like impenetrability. You picture a knight in full plate armor, or maybe a massive, solid concrete dam that's holding back millions of gallons of river water.
Yeah, the whole cultural assumption is that strength has to be inherently dense, like solid, unbreakable.
Unbreakable, right. And it's basically an additive theory of survival.
Oh, completely. The instinct is always to accumulate layers, build thicker walls, reinforce your position against whatever external forces are threatening you.
But today, we're stepping into the framework of ancient Eastern philosophy, and it reveals this completely inverted reality.
It really flips the script on what power actually is.
It does, because in this framework, that solid concrete dam isn't a symbol of strength at all. It's actually a massive vulnerability just waiting to fracture.
Which is such a wild way to look at it.
Right. The text we are decoding today suggests that the most unbreakable, powerful force in the entire universe is completely empty. So today we are immersing ourselves in an analytical breakdown of Chapter 6 of the Tao Te Ching.
Attributed to the ancient Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu.
Exactly. And our mission for this deep dive is to dissect how this specific text, which, uses all this imagery of valleys, bellows, and empty space maps, out a radical blueprint.
A blueprint for finding inexhaustible energy.
Yes, inexhaustible energy in our modern, super burnout-prone lives. So, what if true strength doesn't come from being unbreakable, but from being entirely empty?
It's quite the hook. And to understand why a text that's literally thousands of years old resonates so uncomfortably well with our 21st century exhaustion, we really have to look at the environment it came from.
Right, because the Tao Te Ching wasn't written in some peaceful utopian vacuum.
Not at all. It emerged during the Warring States period in China. And that was an era defined by centuries of brutal, relentless conflict.
Just total chaos and societal collapse.
Exactly. The people living through that era were desperately trying to figure out how to survive when everything around them was it was being destroyed by competing warlords.
Warlords who were basically trying to act like those impenetrable dams we just talked about.
Right, exactly.
Which makes the core tension of this deep dive so compelling. Because if the prevailing strategy of the time was to build bigger armies and thicker fortress walls to be as solid and dominant as possible, Lao Tzu is effectively walking onto a battlefield and telling everyone they're doing it wrong.
Yeah, he's saying that true strength, the kind that actually outlasts empires, comes from being entirely empty.
It's a total rejection of the idea that having endless energy requires filling yourself up. He's proposing that power requires making space. So let's start where the text starts.
Yeah, the source material opens this argument by tackling the fundamental nature of the universe, what Taoists refer to as the Tao.
Which loosely translates to the way, right?
Right, the way. But because the Tao is this massive abstract concept, it's essentially the underlying operating system of existence. The text uses a very specific, grounded image to explain it.
It introduces the concept of a creator, but not in the patriarchal sky god sense that Western philosophy usually defaults to.
No, it's very different.
The text highlights the term Gushen, which is translated here as the spirit of the valley.
Or the mystic female, which the commentary also refers to as the Great Mother.
Okay, let's unpack this. Why a valley?
Well, the linguistic choice of Gushen is very deliberate. Gu refers to a valley, a gorge, or a ravine. And Shen refers to spirit, mystery, or a divine essence.
Got it. So the spirit of the valley.
Exactly. And the commentary focuses heavily on why Lao Tzu chose the valley as the ultimate representation of creative power. Because a valley is defined entirely by a contradiction.
How so?
Well, it's characterized by being empty, right? But it is undeniably real and highly visible.
Right. It's defined by what isn't there. You have mountains on either side, and those mountains create the boundaries. But the valley itself is just the negative space between them.
And the text points out that it is precisely this emptiness that allows the valley to function as a receptacle.
Because it's the lowest point.
Yes. It's low and perfectly empty. So it naturally gathers water, accumulates fertile soil, and becomes the cradle that supports all life.
The text actually explicitly compares this empty space to a womb, doesn't it?
It does, an environment entirely defined by its capacity to incubate existence. And you have to consider the physical reality of the geography they were looking at back then.
Right, their actual surroundings.
Yeah, the Yellow River Valley was the literal cradle of their civilization. The mountains were barren, harsh, and deadly. But the valley, because of its low and empty posture, was where the agriculture, the villages, and the life actually happen.
The clay of the mountains gives the earth its shape, but the empty space of the valley gives the earth its purpose.
Wow, yeah, that's a great way to put it.
I am thinking about this in terms of a mundane, everyday object, like a coffee mug.
A coffee mug.
Yeah, think about it. A coffee mug is essentially a handheld valley. Its entire functional value is derived from the empty space inside it.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
If you hand me a solid fired block of ceramic clay that's shaped like a cylinder, I mean, it might be heavy, it might make a great paperweight, but as a mug, it's completely useless.
Right, you can't pour coffee into a solid block.
Exactly. The utility of the object only exists because of the void it contains.
What's fascinating here is that the Tao functions identically to that void.
Mm-hmm.
It is the formless space that allows all physical forms to operate.
Without the empty space inside a room, the walls just form a solid block of concrete that no one can live in.
Exactly.
I mean, I understand the physics and the logic of the metaphor, but I have to advocate for the listener here. You know, the person who is navigating a highly competitive corporate environment, or trying to secure funding for a startup, or just trying to survive a brutal job market right now.
Right, the reality of modern life.
Because human nature, especially in a capitalist framework, idolizes the mountain. We want to be tall, dominant, imposing, highly visible.
We certainly do.
We structure our entire society around reaching the quote-unquote peak of our careers or being at the top of our fields. So when someone tells me to adopt the posture of a valley, literally the absolute lowest point in the landscape, it sounds like a recipe for getting trampled.
It sounds like he'll just be ignored and passed over for promotion.
Exactly. So why would the text elevate the valley as the ultimate symbol of power?
Well, that reaction is entirely expected because we view power through a lens of dominance and short-term victory. But the source text addresses this exact friction.
Okay, how?
By introducing the mechanics of feminine energy as it relates to the Tao. And the commentary is really careful to define this not in biological terms, but in energetic ones.
Okay, so energetic.
Right. The energy of the Tao is not aggressive. It doesn't thrust itself into the sky to battle the wind and the elements like a mountain does.
The text describes it as possessing a persistent, stubborn strength derived entirely from gentleness.
Yes. Stubborn strength derived from gentleness.
Which sounds incredibly poetic, but how does that actually translate to surviving the elements, or in our case, the modern corporate world? Because my instinct is that if I'm gentle, I just get eroded.
But look at the geological timeline the text is operating on. The mountain appears powerful because it is rigid and imposing. But that rigidity is exactly what destroys it.
Because it can't bend.
Exactly. Over millennia, the wind, the ice, and the rain beat against the mountain. And because the mountain is solid and unyielding, it absorbed the full kinetic impact of the weather.
So it fractures.
It crumbles. It loses millions of tons of its own mass. The mountain is constantly in a state of decay disguised as dominance.
Oh, wow. And all of that eroded mass, all the rich minerals and soil, where does it go? It washes straight down into the valley.
Exactly. And the valley exerts zero effort to take the mountain's resources. The valley yields, it sits low, and it simply catches everything the mountain is forced to surrender.
Gravity just does the work for it.
Yes. The text uses the metaphor of the mother to illustrate this. The valley gives birth to and nurtures life without the exhausting desire to possess it or tightly control it. The long-term, enduring power is in yielding and receiving, not in fighting a constant battle against friction.
But the timeline is the catch here, isn't it? I mean, the mountain takes 1 million years to erode. I only have an 80-year lifespan.
Right.
And my career might only span 40 of those years. So why shouldn't I try to be the mountain for those 40 years and enjoy the view from the top rather than waiting for, geological time to reward my humility as a valley?
It's a fair question. But the text implies that the human equivalent of geological erosion is burnout.
Oh, wow. Okay.
When you try to be the mountain in your career, you are adopting a posture of rigidity. You are constantly defending your territory, fighting off competitors, projecting this image of invulnerability.
And you're absorbing the kinetic impact of every single crisis.
Exactly. And that kind of psychological rigidity spikes cortisol, exhausts the nervous system, and inevitably leads to a physical or mental fracture.
So you might hold the peak for a few years, but the cost is total systemic depletion.
Yes. The text proposes the valley as a strategy for inexhaustible endurance. You don't have to break yourself to survive.
Which forces us to look at how that endurance actually operates. Because, providing an empty space to catch rain is one thing, But the text makes a much bolder claim.
It does.
It states that this emptiness doesn't just passively hold water, it actively generates immense, inexhaustible power. So we need to understand the mechanism of that generation.
Right, and the commentary moves to the next central phrase of Chapter 6 to explain this. Empty yet inexhaustible.
Empty yet inexhaustible.
The Tao has no physical shape. It is entirely devoid of substance, yet it continuously produces all matter and life in the universe.
And to explain how a void acts as an engine, the text provides a mechanical analogy, right? The wooden bellows.
Yes, the blacksmith's tool used to pump air into a forge. If you dismantle a traditional bellows, what do you actually find inside? Nothing. It is literally a chamber of empty space enclosed by wood and leather.
There's no motor, there's no chemical fuel, no internal power source at all.
Exactly. Yet it is precisely the emptiness of that chamber that allows it to function. Expanding the bellows creates a vacuum that draws in air. Compressing it violently expels that air.
And the text points out that as long as the pumping motion continues, that empty space will produce a massive, roaring wind capable of stoking a fire hot enough to melt steel.
The engine is fueled entirely by a vacuum.
That is wild. The more it empties itself, the more power it can generate.
That's the paradox the commentary really emphasizes. And the concept of eternity in the text is tied directly to this mechanical truth.
How so?
Well, the Tao has birthed the universe countless times, but because its core self is fundamentally a void, it has nothing to deplete. A piece of coal burns up and turns to ash because it has physical substance.
Right. A chemical battery drains because its components degrade.
But a bellows never degrades from moving air. It is an infinite loop of creation, sustained by a total lack of physical mass.
Translating that mechanical reality to human physiology makes the concept incredibly stark. Like, consider the mechanics of human lungs.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
If you're preparing to dive underwater and you need to take the most massive, powerful breath possible, the absolute worst thing you can do is try to inhale while your lungs are already partially full.
Right, you can't add air to a full tank.
Exactly. The very first action you have to take is a forceful exhale. You have to push all the stale residual air out of your system. You have to completely empty the chamber before you have the atmospheric pressure and physical capacity to draw in a massive, life-sustaining breath.
The capacity for new energy physically requires the prior creation of empty space.
Which brings us into a direct, really uncomfortable collision with modern society, because the culture we inhabit is fundamentally terrified of empty space.
It truly is.
Yeah.
We are relentlessly incentivized to be full.
In every conceivable metric, we wear our full schedules as badges of honor. Like, a calendar blocked from dawn to dusk is equated with high societal value.
And a full inbox means you are in demand.
Exactly. We walk around with full minds, constantly consuming content, scrolling through endless short-form videos, listening to audiobooks at double speed while we commute.
The moment we feel an empty gap in our day, say, standing in line at the grocery store for 2 minutes, we immediately pull out our phones to fill the void with data.
We treat emptiness as a threat. So how does the philosophy of the bellows diagnose this modern obsession with fullness?
The text diagnoses it as a profound, self-inflicted limitation. By constantly stuffing the chamber full, we are artificially capping our own capacity.
Right.
The commentary asks us to imagine taking that blacksmith's bellows and, out of a fear of it being empty, packing it full of rocks, sand, and heavy debris.
Well, the leather wouldn't compress, the chamber couldn't expand.
Exactly. The bellows become solid, heavy, and completely incapable of creating wind. It loses its entire function. The text assertion that the Tao is empty yet inexhaustible carries a severe psychological warning. Maintaining our own mental and emotional emptiness is the only way to avoid the burnout of the mountain. It is the only way to remain endlessly creative.
You know, modern cognitive psychology backs this up entirely, particularly concerning cognitive load theory and the brain's default mode network.
Oh, definitely.
Working memory is a finite space. If your mind is packed with the rocks of constant notifications, low-level anxiety, and a never-ending mental to-do list, your working memory is full.
You literally lack the neurological bandwidth to draw in a new, complex idea.
Right. You have no mental space to generate a creative solution to a problem because you are suffocating on your own cognitive fullness. The brain requires the default mode network, which is essentially the state of daydreaming, mind-wandering, mental emptiness, to synthesize information and generate insight.
And by rushing to fill every quiet moment with external noise, we are actively plugging up the valley. We are destroying the very environment designed to catch the water and generate life.
We exhaust ourselves not because we are doing too much value, but because we refuse to allow the bellows to empty.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've established the framework. We understand the necessity of the void, the infinite power of the empty bellows, and the danger of cognitive and physical rigidity.
Right.
But there is a massive metaphysical leap that the text takes here, and it's one that requires careful navigation.
Mhm.
How does this invisible void actually cross over into physical reality?
That is the big question.
But how does nothingness suddenly produce the physical world we are sitting in right now, the microphone on this desk, or the biological cells in our bodies? How does the unseen become seen?
The commentary introduces a highly specific concept from Lao Tzu to explain this transition: the gate of the mysterious mother, which the source text explicitly identifies as the root of heaven and earth.
The gate of the mysterious mother. Okay, the terminology is evocative, but what exactly does this gate symbolize in a practical or structural sense?
The commentary explains it as the ultimate threshold. It is the microscopic conceptual point of intersection between two entirely distinct realms.
Okay, two realms.
On one side of the gate is the invisible world, the Tao, the formless void, the infinite empty billows we've been discussing. And on the other side is the visible world, everything that possesses mass, dimension, and physical reality.
So the gate connects them.
Yes. The text argues that this gate is the exact locus where pure, formless energy crystallizes and transforms into tangible substance.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I am visualizing this process through the lens of a prism.
A prism. I like that.
Yeah, because white light traveling through the vacuum of space is invisible to the human eye. You cannot perceive it. But the moment that invisible energy strikes the angled glass of a prism, the gate, it slows down, refracts, and instantly transforms into a highly visible, tangible, multicolored spectrum.
That's a perfect way to look at it. The prism didn't create the light out of nothing. It simply acted as the threshold that translated the invisible into a format the physical world could interact with.
The energy was pre-existing. The gate merely provided the mechanism for manifestation. Or, another analogy that maps well to modern technology is a 3D printer.
Oh yeah, that's good.
Think about it. The Tao, the invisible realm, is just the digital CAD file sitting on a hard drive. It is just code. It has no physical mass, no texture, and it takes up zero space in the physical room.
Right, it's completely abstract.
But when you send that invisible code through the 3D printer, the gate, it begins to extrude physical material. Layer by layer, the invisible void is manifested into a tangible plastic object right in your living room. The physical world we see is just a continuous, ongoing printout of the unseen code.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that analogy perfectly captures the continuous nature of the process, and the commentary emphasizes the profound philosophical implications of calling this gate the root of heaven and earth.
Because a root implies something shared, right?
Yeah.
Like in systems theory or botany.
Exactly. It means the physical world isn't a collection of disparate objects. We are conditioned by our senses to view the material world as deeply fragmented. We look around and see a tree, a building, a dog, a human being, and we categorize them as separate, isolated entities.
Right.
But if everything passes through this singular gate, if everything is anchored to this one root, it means every physical thing in existence is inextricably connected to the same invisible source.
So we are just the visible blooms on a massive shared underground mycelium network.
That's beautifully put. The text challenges you to abandon the illusion of separation. It asks you to recognize the physical object in front of you, even your own body, is a temporary, localized expression of a deeper, permanent emptiness. The root is always there, quietly pumping the energy of the bellows into the physical realm.
Okay, this level of abstraction is fascinating, but I think it also risks becoming deeply alienating. Well, we are zooming out to the level of quantum mechanics and cosmic root systems. But if a listener is sitting in their car right now, stressed about a looming mortgage payment, dealing with a toxic manager, trying to figure out what to make for dinner, knowing that they are a temporary bloom on an invisible root system is not particularly helpful on a Tuesday afternoon.
That's very fair.
The critical question is whether this high-level philosophy actually offers a practical tool for daily survival. Like, how do I use the bellows when my inbox is literally on fire?
The source material actually anticipates this exact disconnect. It brings the philosophy crashing back down to earth with the final translation from Chapter 6. It is always within you. You can use it any way you want.
Always within you. Okay, that fundamentally alters the relationship. It's not an external resource you have to go mine or pray to.
No, the commentary draws a hard line here.
Yeah.
The Tao is not a distant deity. It is not some bearded figure sitting on a cloud far away in the sky, requiring transactional prayers or sacrifices to intervene in your life.
It's nature itself.
Yes. It is defined as the fundamental nature of reality, and it insists that this nature is currently, at this very millisecond, flowing through your own biological breath and conscious spirit. You are the bellows. The void is inside you. Therefore, you already have unbroken access to this inexhaustible power source.
So the infrastructure is already installed, the connection is live, the issue isn't gaining access to the power, the issue is our methodology for applying it without destroying ourselves in the process.
Precisely. And the expert commentary introduces the specific prescribed methodology for wielding this energy. It is perhaps the most famous and misunderstood concept in Taoist philosophy, Wu Wei.
Ah, Wu Wei. I have seen that translated in various ways, often as doing nothing or inaction, which immediately sounds like an endorsement of extreme laziness or apathy.
Which is a catastrophic misinterpretation of the text. The commentary explicitly defines Wu Wei not as doing nothing, but as using energy without trying or forcing it.
Oh, interesting.
A more accurate translation is effortless action or frictionless action. It means identifying the natural currents and physics of a situation and flowing with them, rather than exerting immense, exhausting, artificial control over an environment that doesn't want to be controlled.
So what does this all mean? The distinction between forced action and effortless action reminds me of the mechanics of moving a boat across water.
Okay, let's hear it.
Imagine you are in a heavy wooden rowboat in the middle of a massive lake. If you want to move forward using forced action, you pick up the oars. You use your own physical musculature, your own finite glycogen stores to violently push against the density of the water.
Right, you are the sole engine.
Exactly. And for a while, you'll make progress. But inevitably, your muscles will fill with lactic acid, your cardiovascular system will max out, and you will collapse from exhaustion. You are relying entirely on a finite battery.
You are attempting to be the mountain. You are fighting the environment.
Yes. Conversely, look at a sailor. A sailor practicing Wu Wei doesn't create the wind. They don't jump out of the boat and try to physically push the hull through the water.
No, that would be absurd.
They simply hoist a sail, which, by the way, is an empty piece of canvas, and adjust its angle to catch the massive, pre-existing, inexhaustible power of the atmospheric pressure. They align themselves with the physics of the nature around them.
And the sailor is still highly active, right?
Right. They are constantly observing, steering, adjusting the rigging. But the force propelling the boat is not their own. They have tapped into the infinite bellows of the universe.
The cognitive shift there is profound. The sailor achieves massive velocity with minimal physiological cost. The rower achieves minimal velocity with massive physiological cost.
But let's apply this to a real-world high-stakes scenario. Let's say I am managing a critical project at work. The deadline is rigid, the client is furious, and half my team just quit.
The water is incredibly choppy.
Very choppy. And my instinct is to grab the oars. I want to micromanage everyone, work 80-hour weeks, scream at the vendors, and force the project across the finish line through sheer force of will. How do I apply Wu Wei in a corporate crisis without just letting the project fail?
To apply Wu Wei in that scenario requires taking a step back and analyzing where the actual currents are flowing versus where your ego wants them to flow. If you try to row through a hurricane, you sink.
Right.
Wu Wei means stopping the frantic micromanagement and looking at the system. What resources do you actually have? What is genuinely possible within the time frame? It might mean having a brutally honest, yielding conversation with the client to adjust expectations, rather than rigidly lying to them that everything is fine.
Because lying is forcing an unnatural reality.
Exactly. It might mean empowering the remaining team members to work in their own style, rather than forcing them into your panic-driven process.
Yeah.
It is about removing the friction of your own ego from the equation.
It's the difference between swimming against a riptide and swimming parallel to the shore.
Exactly right.
If you get caught in a riptide in the ocean, every survival instinct screams at you to swim directly toward the beach. But the current is stronger than you. If you try to force your agenda on the ocean, if you fight the riptide, you will exhaust yourself and drown.
Which is exactly what happens in burnout.
Right. Wu Wei is the lifeguard's advice. Relax, remain buoyant, and swim parallel to the shore. Let the current take you sideways until you naturally slip out of its grip. You are still swimming, you are still intent in survival, but you are not fighting the mathematically superior force of the water.
Fighting the natural flow is almost always a manifestation of the ego's demand for control. The commentary warns that this rigid demand for control is the primary source of human suffering and exhaustion. When we force things, we sever our connection to the root.
Which brings up a critical question about boundaries for me.
Okay.
If I am always yielding, always acting like the valley, and practicing wu-wei, how do I avoid becoming a doormat? Like if my boss is verbally abusive or a partner is taking advantage of me, does effortless action mean I just yield to their abuse? That seems incredibly dangerous.
That's a really important caveat, and the text does not advocate for victimhood. It advocates for strategic physics.
Strategic physics.
Think about water. Water is the ultimate symbol of the Tao and Wu-Wei. Water is infinitely yielding. You can punch water, and it simply moves out of the way. It takes zero damage from your aggression.
Right.
But water is also the most destructive force on Earth. A tsunami does not negotiate. A river carves the Grand Canyon not by fighting the rock, but by persistently flowing around it until the rock ceases to exist.
Wow.
Yielding does not mean staying in an abusive situation. Yielding might mean recognizing that you cannot change a toxic boss, and instead of wasting years trying to fight them and fix their personality, you effortlessly redirect your energy into finding a new job and walking out the door. The water simply flows to a new valley.
That is a crucial distinction. The yielding is a tactical choice to preserve your own energy, not a mandate to accept suffering. It is about refusing to engage in a futile war of attrition.
And the commentary brings us all together in its final synthesis of Chapter 6. The ultimate lesson of the text is to actively cultivate an internal emptiness.
Just like the valley.
Yes. This means clearing the mind of rigid expectations, rigid timelines, and the exhausting obsession with how things should be. By remaining calm, empty, and flexible, we maintain a perfect, unblocked connection to the inexhaustible root.
Because physically and psychologically, energy can only flow into a space that is prepared to receive it.
Precise.
If your mind is absolutely full of anxiety about the future, resentment about the past, and a rigid ego that demands everything go exactly your way, there is simply no room for the bellows to pump new oxygen into your system.
And the text delivers a stark warning here. If we become full of ourselves, arrogant or rigid, if we decide to play the role of the impenetrable mountain, we actively snap the root.
We break the connection.
All right. A rigid tree branch takes the full force of a hurricane and snaps. A flexible stalk of bamboo bends completely flat against the earth, letting the wind pass over it and snaps back up when the storm passes. Rigidity is not strength, it is brittleness.
We think our armor is protecting us, but it is actually suffocating us. The heavy plate armor we put on to survive the work week is isolating us from the very energy source that could sustain us naturally. It is making us too heavy to float.
Dropping the armor, allowing yourself to become empty like the valley, is not a capitulation to weakness. Within the framework of the Tao Te Ching, it is the ultimate, supreme act of power.
It's the realization that you don't have to generate the energy to survive. You just have to stop blocking the energy that is already there.
Exactly.
Well, the journey through this single chapter has been a complete deconstruction of how we view effort and endurance. We began with the imagery of the mystic female and the valley, dissecting how true creative power isn't found in aggressive dominance or building towering monuments to our own egos.
But in having the humility to provide a nurturing empty space that effortlessly catches the resources around it.
Right. And then we moved into the mechanics of the bellows, uncovering the paradox that the universe operates on an infinite loop of creation fueled entirely by a void.
We explored how our modern terror of emptiness, our relentless drive to fill every cognitive and physical space, is exactly what causes our systemic burnout.
We traced how that invisible void crosses the threshold of reality through the gate of the mysterious mother, acting as an invisible shared root system that binds every physical object and living creature together.
Dissolving the illusion that we are isolated actors fighting the universe alone.
And ultimately, we grounded these cosmic principles in the biology of our own breath. We examined wu-wei, the practice of dropping our rigid oars and hoisting a sail.
By letting go of our manufactured friction and aligning with the natural currents of reality, we tap into a power source that cannot be depleted.
This text offers a genuinely radical reframing of what it takes to survive the modern world. You do not need to be the loudest person in the room to command respect. You do not need a hyper-optimized, completely full schedule to be valuable.
You do not need to be the hardest, most unyielding force in your industry to be powerful.
True endurance, the kind of strength that survives the Warring States period or, a modern economic collapse, comes from being utterly flexible. It comes from being comfortably, confidently empty, ensuring you always have the internal capacity to receive whatever chaos comes your way and transform it into something vital.
It is the strength of the void, it is quiet, it is persistent, and it is entirely unbreakable.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to carry into the rest of your week. A question to interrogate while you are commuting, sitting in a meeting, or looking at your endless list of responsibilities.
It's a good one to ponder.
We started this conversation by examining our instinct to reinforce ourselves, to build thicker dams and heavier armor out of a deep-seated fear of emptiness. But if the philosophy of the Tao is correct, if the greatest, most inexhaustible power in the universe is generated specifically by the presence of a void, what is the one thing in your life right now that you are working so frantically to fill that you desperately need to just let empty out?
Where is your rigidity costing you your peace?
Consider what might happen if you stop exhausting yourself trying to be the mountain and simply allow yourself to be the valley. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep interrogating the structures around you, keep observing the currents, and as always, stay curious.